Hey guys, welcome back to Prepping in Progress, and this is Prep Talk, or Jeep Talk, or both. It's probably in both playlists by now. So, let's talk about SHTF and things to consider. So stay with me. Hey guys, before we get into this topic today, we're going to do our prayers. I'm going to ask you to pray for me and my family. Sometimes life gets tough, and sometimes it's hard just to put one foot in front of the other. So keep us in your prayers. Let's bow our heads. Father, today we're going to bring Brandon before you again. The burns are healing, but keep him in your arms, keep Mike in your arms, keep their entire family going, and give them the strength to carry on. Please be with the people in Northwest Arkansas and Dallas and everywhere in between that were affected by the storms earlier this week. We have some very special needs that you know, and please help those needs to be met. We'd like you to take Brother Bear in your arms. Father, he's got some projects coming up and he's going to need your blessings to get them done. He puts so much into these projects, Lord, and please help the needs to be met. Amen. Guys, I'm going to put a link up above to a video that Bear put up earlier this week. He was in Northwest Arkansas, and apparently he's got two sites. I'm very familiar with the first and the people involved. One of the people is actually a subscriber here, someone who sat at a screen with you and joined in our community. A tree fell down in the storm and took out a corner of his house. Bear was up there this week cutting up the tree so they could figure out what the damage was and what they would need to do to effect repairs. These missions aren't free. The man needs money. The man needs building supplies. And if you'll take a look at his video, you'll see a bit more what they need it for. I'm going to put a link to the GoFundMe for Grindstone Ministries. In the description, but I encourage you to take a look at that video and if you feel led, help him out. I've been honored to be a part of one of his operations. And let me tell you something, guys, this is worthwhile. In fact, one of my favorite shirts, Team Lemonade. We make lemonade out of lemons. We had a really hard time on our trip, but things just kept seeming to coming together. So if you feel led, follow the links and help Brother Bear out. And if you can't, keep him in your prayers. Keep the member of the Prepping in Progress family in your prayers as he gets this sorted out. Thanks, guys. Let's get back to the Jeep. Appreciate y'all, and thank you for being here. So, we're on the road, headed home from our first time taking out the RV. You watch that the last prep talk for thoughts on things to consider. But that got me rolling on various kinds of SHTF. You know, you always hear when you're talking about, you know, getting a bug out vehicle, getting this, getting that. Particularly if you say, well, I just got a 2014 Jeep. Well, dude, you know, what if it's an EMP? It's going to knock out the computers. Well, I'm willing to get into my theories on that, and having been a mechanic who worked on a vehicle with a body control module that was dying, I have some thoughts. But let's look at that. I mean, that wonderful comment, well, dude, what if it's an EMP? Okay. What are the chances of an EMP? We are overdue for a coronal mass ejection. We have tested the effects of an EMP via nuclear detonation in the atmosphere. And in the 1940s, early 50s, all of the power in Honolulu was knocked out by one. Project Starburst, I believe. I could have the name of the project mixed up with something else. But okay, so it's a given. A 1980s or older vehicle, barring significant upgrades and computerization, is probably your number one option for an EMP. And with global tensions at the moment, I'd give it a 30-70% chance that it's not going to happen. 30% chance it's going to happen, 70% chance the triggering event will probably not be an EMP.
In 3/4 of a mile, turn left.
Now, I will hit you with that it could be a poor man's EMP, an attack, whether cyber or physical, on the key points in the electrical grid system itself. I can go along with that. But I just don't see Cold War fear use of nuclear weapons as a viable option. I mean, even with Iran and Iraq and our tensions there,
Turn left.
they launch at us, we launch at them. There really is a nuclear detente similar to what we had in the Cold War with Russia. So let's start looking
Continue on
at
route.
more viable options, shall we? What else is there? And before we move on, don't get me wrong, I do consider an EMP a viable option. But let's look more deeply at other possibilities. Our economy is having issues. Recently, I caught an article on one of the investor magazines that $75 billion was being dropped into circulation. Now, what does that mean when the Federal Reserve is dropping $75 billion into circulation? It does not mean they are printing off 75 billion $1 bills. It means that they have gone into their computers and created a bunch of ones and zeros and said, ooh, we have more money in the bank. I mean, stop and think about this for a minute. In theory, they can create several trillion ones and zeros and pay off our national debt, right? Except that they would devalue our currency so much that it would probably cease being a reserve currency on the oil markets. And that is really what's holding our country afloat, is the petrodollar. And I'm oversimplifying the situation a great deal. But where I'm going with this is, economically, we are looking more and more at some form of economic collapse. You know, how many years has Ron Paul been running for president and yelling about the economy? Even Rand Paul, his son, who ran on the Republican ticket instead of the independent or libertarian ticket, brought it up briefly. I consider the possibility of economic issues being a major SHTF factor and something that we need to look into. Now I'm going to get a little conspiracy theory on you. Noriega. Some of you are too young to remember him. Saddam Hussein. Most of you remember him. There is a theory out there floating that while he was a despot and a drug dealer and whatnot, Noriega was moving his small country toward a gold standard. He was stockpiling. And that was the real reason why we went after him. There's a theory out there that Hussein was moving Iraq towards a gold standard. And that's why the real reason why we went into Iraq. It wasn't him going after Kuwait the first time that heightened our tensions. It wasn't weapons of mass destruction. It was gold. keep in mind, we haven't been on the gold standard for years. You know, it used to be you could walk in, exchange one paper dollar for one gold dollar, and it was literally $1 worth of gold. You want to go even deeper into the conspiracy theories? There's one that's been floating around for ages that the bottom of the World Trade Center was filled with gold bars, and that vault was emptied right before September 11, 2001. I'm not saying they're true, I'm not saying they're not. What I'm saying is that my fear is a reset. Don't get me wrong, I'm good with the long-term outcome of a fiscal reset. But there are people who are going to starve to death. There are people who are going to lose their pensions. Shoot, they've been saying for how long that Social Security was bankrupt and that the senators have been borrowing from Social Security to pay other funds and dividends. You know, in the mid-'80s, they were saying that was the last generation that would be able to collect Social Security. And you look at some of the people down here in the South who go, well, my retirement plan is my Social Security. They act like they're entitled to it. And if anything in this world is worth being entitled, it is Social Security. You are obligated to pay in to Social Security with your taxes. You know, your paycheck is automatically garnished and it's put into Social Security. Okay. And yet, if you read the fine print on the Social Security paperwork, I believe it says something to the effect of you are not entitled to a payout and you may not be paid out. Okay. But there are a lot of people whose retirement is Social Security. That can be kind of bad for them. So we have the possibility of an EMP due to America being the world's police department and jumping in all over the place. We have the possibility of a fiscal collapse, economic collapse, due to our finances really being a house of cards. And then we have natural disasters. You know, a few years back we had Hurricane Katrina. And there were elements of Florida or Baton Rouge, Louisiana that still haven't recovered. Elements of Florida that still haven't recovered. Grindstone Ministries did some work in Florida 6-8 months ago, and they said the place still looked like a war zone. Okay? I live near Mena, Arkansas right now. At least one of our locations is. Y'all know I've talked about Polk County and Queen Wilhelmina State Park. You know I'm nearby Mena. You know I probably go into Mena to shop at least once a week, once every 2 weeks. You guys know I get to Fort Smith at least once a month. So, Alright, whatever. But, a few years ago, Mina was hit pretty hard by tornadoes. There are houses still falling in on themselves that are either for sale or ready to be demolished. Recently, a whole motel, was razed to the ground because the owner would not bring it back up to code. And in some places, there are flat concrete pads where houses still, used to stand and they still haven't been rebuilt. Mina seems to be recovering slowly. But many times, once a town has been hit with this kind of devastation, it never truly recovers and eventually goes the way of the dodo bird. So what happens? Well, after Katrina, many people were relocated, either voluntarily or involuntarily, not just out of the state, but all the way up to Nebraska. People lost everything, or when they finally got back, most of their possessions were either looted or destroyed. And yet here we sit talking about being able to bug out at a moment's notice. I always liked that movie Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Val Kilmer. Never get so attached to anything that you can't drop it and walk away if you feel the heat coming around the corner. Drop it in like 8 seconds or something and walk away if you feel the heat coming around the corner. And that's the death of the one guy, of the bad guy, because he falls for the girl and tries to figure out a way to make it last. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about bugging out, guys. Walking away immediately from all of our possessions, except for our most prized and our preps, and hopefully we've prepared a place that we've already begun moving to. So we've talked about EMP, economic collapse, natural disaster. Most of these could also be caused by the big T. Wars are not just fought on the ground with troops anymore, they're fought economically. I do foresee, shall we say, economic terrorism becoming prevalent in the future. I do foresee the possibility of, say, a Locker 9 scenario. You can look it up. See what Franklin Horton's causative SHTF event is in that book. Now, for the book club guys, we're going to get to that video, to that book. Right now we're working on 77 Days in September by Mr. Gorham. Keep in mind this grand solar minimum theory that our planet may be entering a mini ice age. Farmers are telling us that they have not seen weather patterns the like of the last year and the year before, but definitely this last year in 50 years of farming. You know, something's going on. Need to be studying weather patterns right now very, very carefully and looking for a new norm. You know, I've been around long enough that I remember when, oh, the hurricanes are coming, so what? And no one reported much afterwards, and, you know, the few areas of Florida and Texas rebuilt, and, you know, North Carolina, South Carolina, and they all moved on. And in the last few years, we've had some doozies. Might want to start keeping your eye on weather patterns and looking for the new norms, adapting your farming plans. Better prep your gardens now, prep your ground now, but adapt your seasonal farming plans to the new patterns that seem to be coming. Because that in and of itself could be an SHTF. Alright guys, those are your thoughts for the day, prep talk. Sorry it wasn't upbeat and we can do it. But guess what? If we study, if we prep, and if we plan, yes, we can do it. We can get through anything. It may be hard, it may be tough, but we're human beings. We adapt and we can do it. Alright guys, I'll see you soon. Let's rock and roll and get working on our preps. Laters.